start making my necessary clutch wallet, I've chosen this really cool girl power fabric. This is going to be my outside. This one is going to be my lining, and I'm going to do my lining a little bit different. Normally you could just make it to be exactly like your outside, but with this one I'm going to seam it in the middle and leave my seam open so that I can turn it there. I'm going to make just a regular flap with no applique on it. I'm going to use a magnetic snap. Be putting that in right there, and I'll be doing that in a little while. I got everything all interfaced and ready to go. I have the credit card pocket fabric cut. That's going to be this. It's all interfaced. And this was a fat quarter bundle. So when you do your wallets with a fat quarter bundle, you can get 1 out of 4 fat quarters with a little bit of fudging if you want to have a wristlet, and you'll need a little bit more if you want a long strap. So with this one I'm going to only be able to do a wristlet. So I've already got my credit card pockets marked with the lines for how I'm going to sew those together. And then I have my zipper pocket section. I'm going to put 2 zippers in this, and so I'm going to do it a little bit different than we normally do. I'm going to use this for my security flap. That's going to go over like that. I'm going to fasten that with Velcro, and have a little bit different technique for doing the 2 zippers than what we've seen in our tutorials. And then here are my heavy interfacings. My Peltex, that's the shape of my flap, and that'll go in. I may need to trim this a little bit because it's a little bit wide. And I found that every time it ends up being a little bit wide, so I just trim it so that it's 1/4 of an inch all the way around. And then this piece of Peltex is going to go on my body, on the opposite end of where my flap attaches on the inside, because this is going to reinforce where my snap, the bottom part of my magnetic snap is. So we're going to go ahead and start with the directions. And page 2 is really important because this gives you the pieces that you need to cut. And here, especially in your pocket fabric, there's no templates for this, so you need to use your ruler and just cut those pieces to be that side. For all the rest of it, there are templates. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to work on is we're going to work on the flap. And the flap, I already have it interfaced, and I may change the directions a little bit on how we're going to do this. This one is giving you directions for a border piece, which we are not going to do, and then it tells you to put the twist lock or lock in right after that. So that's page 3, and with this one we're not going to do that, so we'll just skip over to the next page. Again, we have some directions for putting on the twist locks. I'm going to be using a magnetic lock, and I may put this part on, this bottom part on the body of it at a little bit later stage. So basically up to page 4 is where we're going to go right now. Alright, I've got my flap prepared. I have my Peltex ironed on to the back, actually the lining piece, and I've got the 2 of them, the front and the back, placed on top of each other, right sides together. Now I am using what they call a cording foot, but your zipper foot could be the same. I've trimmed off this side of the Peltex so that I got my 1/4 of an inch right here. I want to maintain that seam allowance, and I'm going to sew with my foot right up next to the Peltex. Now when I come to this corner, I am going to go very slow, basically 1 stitch at a time, because I want to be able to turn that corner with precision as far as my stitching goes. Not catch the Peltex, not have it come to a point someplace, but really kind of make a good gentle curve. And then once I get past that corner, I can kind of guide it a little bit easier by just keeping with the stitching going. Right up next to that Peltex. And that'll make this, when I turn it, it'll make it nice and neat right there. Okay, I'm going to go slowly around here, turning it gently as I go. You might notice at the end here I have cut the Peltex off because this is going to be in my seam that's going to get a lot of different heavy fabrics in it, and I don't really want that Peltex there. I don't need that there. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip my corners. I'm going to trim off some of this excess, and then I'm going to turn it, and then I'll show you what it looks like once it's been turned. That's really all there is to it to make the flap. And there it is. I put my headliner in there. I had trimmed that off to be about maybe 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. I wish I could have got the girl power and their heads on this. I actually made it a little bit longer so that I could not cut off their heads. And then this is going to be the inside of the flap when you lift up the flap and open the bag. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to do a top stitching now around here, and then I'm going to install my magnetic clasp. Well, the directions for this snap came from Pink Sand Beach Designs. They have a lot of great patterns for totes and bags and wallets and things like that. So it's kind of a good product, and it has directions on the back. This is the first time I've actually done the magnetic snap. It's a lot easier if you put this on before you sew it, but a lot of people have had trouble sewing neatly around this little disc, so I decided I would try it afterwards. So we'll see what happens. So this is going to go on the inside, and basically it's got the markings for where the prongs for the magnetic snap are going to go through, and then once you get that through and get that, this is on the inside, then you bend these back and then the snap is in. So hopefully that will work. Sometime during the construction of your flap, you're going to need to decide if you're going to attach D-rings for a wrist strap or for a crossbody strap. Now, one of the decisions that I didn't make was to put my holding strap on in this position, and I would have needed to have done that before I sewed my flap pieces together. I would put a D-ring here and a D-ring on this end, and then sew this down in the middle here. I can't do it now because then you see the stitching on the front. I prefer to do a little bit different. Take that same width of strip and put my D-ring in it, and then cut it off to make a little loop and place it right in this position on either end. And then it'll be incorporated in the seam where I sew my lining and my body together with the flap. I'm going to top stitch that. I'm going to have a lot of secure stitching right across that, because this is going to be kind of a critical point to keep your long strap or your wrist strap securely attached to the bag. You don't want this to rip out. These are 1/2 inch D-rings, and they're kind of hard to find, but I know Emmeline does have them, and that's where I got these. She does have them in different colors, so that's really cool. So what I'm going to do is stitch across this and stitch these in place, just kind of basting them in place, probably about 1/2 inch from the side edge of the flap, and sewing this securely on here so that when I get ready to sew my lining and my body together, and this is going to be right in between it. It'll be in place, and I'll be good. So I need to just trim this great big long piece off because I don't need